Welcome to Leaders Recon. I'm your host, Joshua Carr, and today we're talking about something which is near and dear to my heart, OERs and NCOERs, with two great subject matter experts, Colonel Leland Blanchard, II, and Sergeant Major McCarthy from the G357. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we dive in, I guess, and talking about like the intricacies of, writing support forms, writing OERs, raters, senior raters, some of this stuff, I know you, sir, have talked about how you've sat on boards and stuff before with me. Can you give us, like, our audience a little bit of a, your perspective on, like, as a board member sitting there, what are things that you see repetitively in OERs, NCOERs? What are those things that stand out to you?
Sure. So looking back, and I know we've talked a little bit about this, that board experience is so valuable. And I say that because all the things that I thought were true, some of them turned out to be true, and some of them turned out to not be true. Some of the things that I thought in my own OERs set me apart, I learned maybe not so much. And then some things that I didn't expect, some truths, if you will. So what I would say is that experience, looking back and looking at the board, sitting on a board, is really a leadership development experience, right? So it gave me an opportunity to go from being a senior rater and putting things down and trying to communicate a message, right? But we often say message sent is not necessarily the message that's received. And I think and Sergeant Major, I'm sure, back me up on this, there's no greater truth than when you talk about boards and your evaluations, whether it's NCOERs or OERs, what you as the rater and senior rater, and really as the rated soldier, may think is being relayed to the board may not even be remotely close. And so I just think that formative experience, being able to see how OERs or NCOERs build over time, how it's a narrative. And I know you and I, we've talked about this. It's not about one chapter. It's about the entirety of your career. It's the entirety of the book, right? So each of your evaluations, each element of your board file is a chapter in your book. And so you've got, whether it's your board, your letter to the board, you've got your SRB, those are kind of like the beginnings, right? I mean, that's kind of setting the stage, memo to the board. I will tell you, if you can't write, don't, if you're not writing, you're not a good writer, don't write a letter to the board, or at least have somebody check it out for you.
I guess, on that note, before we dive into some of that, what's like the most like bizarre thing that you've seen on an OER or NCOER? I don't know if you want to, or Sergeant Major, do you have something?
I'm trying to think of something that would...
So things that I've seen recently. So I have seen wrong names, right? And so, it'll say, Linda, I'm just making this up. Linda did a great job, and you realize that the soldier's name is William. So wrong names. I've seen one sentence. I think probably the most egregious evaluation was a senior rater who put one sentence. There were 8 words in there. 2 of the words, one was the rank, one was the last name. So there were 6 words to be said. It was a top block, and there was a grammatical error in those. That's right. Oh, wow. So when you see things like that, you say, what's the most egregious or craziest thing? Stuff like that. Wrong names.
Just and paste.
Yes.
That's what. And don't get me wrong. You get people doing the same jobs, so you can kind of use the same format for the most part, but you got to make it that individual's bullet. It's you can tweak it somehow to make it fit that person.
This is really impactful to me right now, just because I literally have to go write an NCOER right after this. It's on my to-do list. So, sir, you talked about your OERs or your NCOERs being, a book, showcasing your career, chapters in that book. How much, when you're writing an NCOER, like I said, I'm about to do, how much should I be referring back to like previous NCOERs leading up into that versus, focusing only on like that support form? Or what's your advice, Sergeant Major?
So, I mean, if it's the same job, so a lot of times you're in the same job for 2 to 3 years, so I think that would build upon, you can kind of say, went from working at this level, but now a year or two later, I'm at a 100%. But if you're going from a totally different job, it's going to be hard to relate back. You can in certain aspects of just general leadership abilities probably, but out of what you actually do, the only thing off the top of my head that would come into mind is, like, I always tell everyone, try to go to one military school a year, and that's not a PME school. That's a given. You have to do those. Go to something outside, and just think outside the box. Doesn't matter if you're an infantry guy. Doesn't mean you got to go jump out of an airplane. Go to a finance school. Go to force management. Go to anything. Basket weaving. I don't really care.
Some sort of education.
Some sort of education to show that you're trying to improve your foxhole and trying to improve your networking capabilities within the service.
I guess, piggybacking off of what you were saying there, kind of looking back, talking about the same job, I guess one of my questions is, it talks about successive assignments, potentials in your senior rater comments there. Is that something that you look back to, like, previous comments on that when you're writing yours?
Not unless, and so I agree with the Sergeant Major. When you're talking about somebody, say if it's the first time I'm writing an evaluation for you, I'm not really going to look so much at what happened before, right? I mean, there's some regulation, there's some nuance, and there's regulatory and policy guidance on that. But I think when we talk about if this is your second or third evaluation for me, I am going to look at some of those things, because what I don't want to send to the board is the message that I'm cutting and pasting, right? So I don't want those jobs to be the same necessarily. Plus, if you're on your third year working, your last job is probably different, than what it was 2 or 3 years ago. Now, I do want to say in relation to your previous question, there's different perspectives to be taken here, right? So here's what I think is missed by so many people, and I didn't understand again until I sat on a board. As a rater or a senior rater, and looking at that evaluation as you're writing it based on what that snapshot in time, right? But there's another role here, and that's the rated person, the rated soldier. Because if you're really strong at 5 things, right, and you're really good at those things, typically we're going to focus on 1 or 2 of those things. We're going to take your top 1 or 2 strengths, and that's fantastic. Except to a board, over time, when you start looking at 5, 6, 7, 8 evaluations for 2, 3, 4 different people, if it all says the same thing, people start to wonder, are you a one-trick pony? Right? And so that's the discussion that I think has got to occur when you get that as the rated soldier. I think you got to sit down and go, hey, let me take a look at this in a different light. Let me kind of put all of my evals together, and let's take a look at this and say, does this say the same thing over and over again?
Like you said, read it like a book.
Read it like a book. Is it the same chapter happening over and over again? Yeah. And that's a discussion now you can go back to your senior rater or your rater and say, hey, I'd like to have this dialogue. Appreciate that you say I'm really good at A and B, but I've been told for the last 5 years, so I'm genuinely curious, is this is this something that I'm not good at other things? Or is there a possibility you can emphasize through our discussions, through our mentoring and counseling
that I'm good at?
That's right. So that a board is getting a complete picture of what you look like over time, and not just that snapshot over and over and over again.
I mean, you brought up something really good here that I was hoping maybe you could talk about, which is that, like, relationship between the rater, the rated soldier, and then the rated soldier and your senior rater. That's something that, especially as a young officer, I did not grasp the concept of. I know I've mentioned it to you before, but, like, I talked to my senior rater as a new officer like one time. So then when he wrote his comments about me, they're like the most generic things on my first OER, but like, it's my own fault because he didn't know who I was, Right. And so I guess that's, what's your advice on developing that as a I guess, as an officer, and then if you want to talk about it as an NCO.
So, just chime in on that one, sir. It's basically it's what you make of it as the rated soldier, and throughout the years, the squeaky wheel gets grease, and you don't need to be a pain in the butt, but people need to know who you are, and that's your rater and your senior rater. And officer world's a little bit different. I got it. But same concept. It doesn't matter. It's an evaluation, and you should be afforded the opportunity to talk to in person the people that are rating you. You know, it shouldn't just be, you know, oh yeah, I've heard of Carr, so yeah, he sounds like a good guy, so here. You should have had at least a conversation with these people, you know, so they have an idea of who you are. I know right now in the G3 we're getting better at that, of bringing people in. General Adrian's doing a big push on that, but everyone should be reaching out, talking to their soldiers.
Yeah, I think it's something that we talk a lot about, but we're not necessarily real good at as an organization. We talk about, you know, we got a counsel, we got a mentor, we got to have these programs in place. And the reality is you can't just say, hey, counsel someone 4 times a year and we'll call that good. Right, that's a dialogue that's got to occur. So whether it's the platoon leader and platoon sergeant, when the battalion commander comes out, right, to the range and they're watching things, it's a dialogue, quite frankly, that occurs between the sergeant major and the commander, the first sergeant and that company commander. I don't know, we've talked about this, you know, a little bit, you know, as you look to take command, those roles and responsibilities. But it is really a dialogue that has got to be ongoing. It's constant. There's some record keeping that goes into it, but I'm not so tore up about the record keeping as I am, hey, I want to know what's really happening. And so I, as the senior rater, well, I'm challenged to get out there and have the same relationship that the rater's going to have. But that's my job. That's what the Army pays me to do, is to, you know, to know what the heck Josh Carr is going. And then now you got to understand also the differences between what a rater and what a senior rater are really talking about. All right. So we're talking about the difference between performance and potential. And I think also, again, one of those experiences from sitting on a board, you really come to understand the difference between performance. You'd have a high performer where the senior rater is saying, hey, all day long, he's been in this job 4 years. Yeah. He's fantastic at it. The rater says that. And then the senior rater says, as long as he stays in this job, he's good, but not right. And so there's a dialogue that has to occur, and understanding what the roles and responsibilities, and then having that dialogue. And if it's something that happens at OER or NCOER time, then that's unfortunate. And it's a lack of leadership, in my opinion, right? I mean, that's a leadership failure. And I know for me, all the senior NCOs that I've been fortunate to have in my life have been right there to tell me, get your butt out there and make sure that you know what you're saying about these young men and women, because you're making a determination today about how far they're going to go in their career, right? And so now, what's interesting about what you said is, so as a lieutenant, and then you're talking about that company commander who's still only got 4 to 6, 7 years in there, right? And so that responsibility and that relationship with that senior NCO, so important, right? So the first sergeant's not telling you, hey, write this about that lieutenant, and right? But
he's gonna be able to see things that you don't, because he's out checking on soldiers, he's out doing things, he's out seeing that lieutenant, you know, doing his or her job.
And that's what I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit, you know, and I guess we're dancing around it, but focusing on the soldier's perspective, for those of in our audience that are getting ready to build their support forms and do that sort of thing. So like, just taking a personal example from my experience, I remember I had this killer platoon sergeant. Like he was the third one I had, and this guy was just fantastic. Everything was always ahead of the curve from where I was, and I was fresh out of Ranger school, so I was like, oh yeah, checking on all these stuff, you know, and he was always one step ahead of me, just killer, right? And then, so I went to do his evaluation at the end. He hands me his support form. I'd never written like a full, you know, NCOER before, so I'm going through this, and I turn in, and it gets kicked back like faster than a heartbeat. because they're like, this doesn't have substantive comments in it. And but I had based it pretty much entirely off of his support form, and what it came down to was it was just the fact was like I had this great performer that I was trying to do a good evaluation for, but the support form was so weak that I spent a ton of time trying to recreate it to turn it into a good product. And as a young officer, I wasn't very capable of that. So what's your, I guess, advice for soldiers, that are, building these support forms? Like, what are some things, best practices that they should engage in?
One of the things I'll start off with on that is, so support form, me personally, I've used it over the years, but it's not my go-to. My go-to is just a counseling form or even a memorandum format where I can just lay out all sorts of stuff, what I expect, left and right limits, and this is what I want you to do to get an excellent block. This is what I think you should be doing, type deal. I also use even as my own NCOERs is I just keep a journal basically, and it's got if I go to a conference, I got the dates, what the conference was, did I do something at that, and did I speak at it, or did I, why did I go to it, type deal. I do that. If I went TDY, where did I go, who did I see, what did I do, because it's so easy to be like, if you don't write anything down like that, to 12 months later you come back, you're like, oh, now I got to write CAR's OER, but I didn't really write anything down. So the few things that stick out of my head are what I jot down. But if you got pages of stuff, I did this, this, and this, I went to these schools, I did this, if you just take notes of what you do throughout every month, writing an evaluation is not a problem.
Now, and when you say you're taking notes now, are you giving that like kind of journal to your rater then, just of like, hey, this is the exactly what I did over the course of?
Exactly.
I think again, we go back to, so there's a dialogue. It's an ongoing and constant dialogue. And from the rater and rated soldiers' perspective, understand the experience level too, right? So when I'm senior rating somebody now, I have a very different level of experience than I did when I was a captain. And so I needed more feedback. Just like you said, hey, it got kicked back. I needed more of that than I need now. I needed more when I was more, as a junior guy. I needed more input from people because there's so much going on, and I'm trying to master my craft, and I'm trying to really understand it and how people relate, how all those roles and responsibilities interrelate, and how effective one person is. And the way I see the world has changed, right? And really understanding that depth of experience is so important. So again, we're asking a lieutenant, which is the right thing to do, to rate a sergeant first class who's got 12 or 15 years of experience. There's got to be a different dialogue that occurs, right? And if that NCO isn't able to sit down in that first sergeant and that sergeant major and that battalion commander, again, as the senior rater to that platoon leader, there's these dialogues that occur throughout the year. It's just constant. And if that platoon sergeant is the best, and if you're doing the right things as a leader, that you're throwing that platoon sergeant's name out there when the sergeant major comes around and says, hey, we're looking for somebody to go up to the S3, the brigade S3 shop, because they need a stud up there. And I know nobody wants to do it, right? But I'm telling you, that's the dialogue that you say, hey, Sergeant Major, let me tell you something. Because here's what's going to come out of that. He's then going to start asking you some questions, which really is what you're going to end up putting on that platoon sergeant's NCOER. Now, the whole time you're going, I don't want to lose this guy, but you're an advocate. And the rater and senior rater have to become advocates, not just, right? So we're talking about that conversation, that physical conversation. Yeah. But when we put pen to paper, you are an advocate for both the rated soldier and for the organization. Right? And so that those words that you have throughout the year, that's what ends up on the paper. And that's what's helped me over the years.
When you talked about advocacy before a little bit, I know I've sat in some of the professional development sessions that you've done, and you talk about advocacy, in that dialogue, but then also on paper. And I guess that's my question is like, what are some of the things, whether you're writing a support form or you're rating a soldier, what are some of those specific verbiage or terminology that, differentiates, I guess, outstanding performer from a high performer from a performer?
Sure. So first of all, you got to be honest, right? So it's got to be honest and it's got to be timely. So the very first thing is, again, through that dialogue that leads up. So the evaluation is really what we focus on, but it's all the stuff that goes in over the course of the year. And so if I'm honest with people that I'm rating or senior rating, and if I'm timely, it gives them the opportunity to then change behaviors if they need to be changed, or double down and do more of the good stuff that we see. Right. And so then when we take it to paper, not everyone's number one. Can't. Right? And I'm telling you, a board can see. It's hard for me to really explain. I wish everyone could sit and see what we've seen. But you can see when somebody keeps telling everyone they're number one, because the comments beyond, hey, you're number one, really start to look pretty weak. Yeah. And the problem with that is then the person who really was number one gets kind of lumped into that category. So you got to use strong words for your best. But don't let it be a surprise to somebody. If it's a surprise that, hey, I'm big on enumeration, right? The Army says enumeration. Yep. If I have 38 people, yet in a previous job, I'm senior rating 38 majors.
Somebody's number one, and somebody's number 38.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, I may not say, hey, you're number 26, but I'm going to say, hey, you're middle third, bottom third, something like that.
What is the difference there? I know we talk about like qualitative and quantitative. Do either of you want to speak on that a little bit about like?
I will tell you this. Here's number 3 of 9, or let's look at it this way. Yeah. Number 8 of 27, or top third.
Yeah. When he says enumerate, that's what you can say it either way and get your point across.
I would rather be number 3 of 27 than top third, but they're both literally correct.
Yeah, they're both the same thing.
So I guess, Sergeant Major, you've, I'm sure, hired a lot of different folks over the years. What are some of the things that you really look for then when it comes to like those qualitative statements when you're looking through someone, when they send you their 3 OERs for a job packet?
Oh gosh, like we're saying, it's not that you did something. It's either how well you did it, or I'm trying to think of you could go with op tempo, and everybody's got to kind of keep up with it, or else you're going to go to the wayside. But are you a 50% guy, or are you 100%? You're 100% of the time you're meeting the requirements, or maybe 50% of the time, or 70% of the time. You can use percentages. You can use if you're graduating a school or something like that. I always think everyone just like graduate. All right, well, did you successfully graduate? How did you? Were you top? Were you the honor graduate? How can we expand upon that? To even do even better. So just any way you can do that.
Yeah, and again, I'd be very clear that responsibility and the delineation between a rater and a senior rater is so misunderstood. Mm-hmm. So understand when you're talking about performance, to me, it's very easy. In most cases, there's some positions that maybe are more challenging, but your top performers the numbers are going to be there. They did X number of whatever repetitions. They got more of their soldiers through whatever, right? These different things. But then you got to look and you got to extrapolate from that, what's your potential? All right. And so don't mix those things up. And as you get after that and you ask, how do you look at, when you're hiring somebody, or you're looking at, a board is not going to focus on just what they've done. They're talking about, hey, we have all of these qualified people. Who's the most qualified? What sets them apart? And, you get a lot of that, those specifics, right? So as a rater, you're writing, hey, 28 out of 32 repetitions, or whatever, was the number one of this. Platoon was the best at this. Right. Had 4 of 5 soldiers successfully graduate Ranger School, which, that's huge. That's a big deal. But then when you go down to that senior rater portion, you're talking about what is this person going to do for us into the future? And so you got to jump from some of those, you know, I will tell you as a board member, I really start to look at what's a stronger word than, you know, you're comparing. Somebody else had your job before you were in it. You moved on to a different job. Somebody else backfilled you. So 3, 4, 5, we really pretty much have the same experiences. For you, for example, everyone was a platoon leader. Everyone was going to be a company XO. Everyone's going to be a company commander, S3, some of those jobs. Everyone's got the same jobs. So what is setting you apart? And then when we're talking about setting you apart, don't, you know, raters and senior raters, you got to use strong words. But I'm going to go back to, again, before you sign that evaluation, that NCOER or that OER, as the rated soldier, look at it as if it's another chapter, right? Because you don't want the same thing, and you want to show that you're building towards something. If everyone's writing the same thing, or it's just kind of, yeah, hey, I'm successfully navigating. Okay, so you're successfully floating down a river, or are you in the lead canoe, taking charge, making sure that people are getting fed? And that's and would I want you to be the expedition leader the next time?
Well, I guess that brings me to another question then. You're talking about it like progressively, you know, growing, like seeing that, you know, that character in the book develop, you know.
Definitely.
You know, my battalion commander, when I was, after I got that first OER, because I went and talked to them about it, I was like, hey,
what do we got to do to fix this?
And I was just like, because I just got out of Ranger School and everything, I was like, I just want to be the best, you know, so I was like, what do I need to do to be the best? And so, you know, and he explained to me this concept that, like, well, you want your OERs to show growth over the course. Like, you don't want to be top blocked your first one and not on the next one, like, potentially. What's your thoughts on that?
My thought is, I'll just tell you from my perspective, yeah, you can keep that. I want to be number one on every evaluation. Now, if you're not, again, that honest dialogue, what is keeping that whole, listen, I'm going to tell you something, Cap Carr, that whole, you got to show growth. How about this? How about I show you growth by actually growing, and you give me more on put more on my plate, and I will do more. That to me, I just disagree with that. I'll leave it at that.
I will caveat on you rate them how they need to be rated. If that's a top block, that's a top block. It's not, I'm not going to downgrade something because I don't think you need it yet or something. No. And I'm a firm believer on NCOERs, at least, is not everybody far exceeds everything. No, that should be few and far between. That shouldn't be the norm. The norm is met standard. And then anything above that is how I can kind of check it off. So, I mean, if I see an NCOER that's got all the left blocks far exceeds, it almost makes me not even want to read it.
So how do you manage your profile then? Speaking of that, because like I know that's something that, you know, might be a little bit confusing to some of our listeners. Everyone has a profile they have to manage. Do you want to expound on that a little bit?
So it's a little different for us NCOs because we just started doing that a few years ago. Officers been doing it for years, so they kind of know how to game the system per se. I'll leave it at that, but they do, trust me. But basically, you know, NCOERs, I'm pretty sure it's 24%. I can give a top block 24% of the time. So if I got 4 people, basically I can give 1. That's it. And so we're a little more conservative because I think you guys are top 49 or something up until 06. So you have a little more leeway with those. But me personally, it means something a little different to the officers than it does enlisted. I mean, granted, we have, I don't even remember. I know it's highest. I don't even remember what the heck they're called right now. But anyways, most qualified, you know, and so me personally, it's pretty much the same damn thing, you know.
So I think the most important thing is words matter more than blocking.
Yeah.
And that's something that's sitting on a board. I would have told you 5 of 5 most qualified, just get you promoted. What I've learned is, and I use that example where you have one sentence and it says most qualified. Do you think that really counted as a most qualified? Or when I see a most qualified and it's clearly cut and paste because it's not even the right name, I'm telling you now, that doesn't carry the weight. I could care less about that blocking. Now, so blocking is important. I mean, listen, I want to be, right, if my boss is listening, I promise you blocking is important to me. However, words are most important. And as far as profile management, I'm going to go back to, you got to be honest and upfront with people early. And so it is very challenging when you move to that next level and all of a sudden, for example, now you are, let's say when you move up to, you might have a couple of lieutenants that you rate or senior rate as a major, but typically when you become a battalion commander, right? So now you've made a transition. And so that number one lieutenant, is he number one against what population? You know, how are you looking at him or her? How are you building that? And then are you ensuring that if the next person that comes in turns out to be the best that you really, truly have ever experienced, that you have space for them? I will tell you, I am ruthless about my profile management. I could tell you, I won't, but I could tell you right now, sitting here, within 1% plus or minus at each grade, what I have to give. I just, it's that important. And it's that important to me because it's that important to me as a rated soldier. So it dang sure should be that important for me as a senior rater, right? Because it's your career. And so I'm telling you, profile management comes down to treating each of those top blocks as well as each of those not qualified blocks, unqualified blocks. Each of them has a role in our system. It means something. It means something and it's different, right? And so this is where the nuances come in, right? I told you earlier, yeah, I want to be number one, but if you're brand new, you're a brand new major and we throw you into a really hard job, right? Where everyone that you're working with as a peer group, maybe they're for like 4 years time and grade now. Doesn't mean that you can't get the top block. But again, words matter. Boards are going to look at when and where you got that top block. I'm not saying grow, because if you're the best, I'm going to give you the top block. Why wouldn't I? And I'm going to rate you number one, strong enumeration. But keep in mind too that boards, when we talk about that growth and when we talk about profile management, boards are made up of human beings. And so I live through this system. It's not robotic, right? It's not a computer. So I live through this system. So I look at it as if that was my paperwork when I'm writing it and when I'm reading it as a board member. And so I'm looking at it going, okay, he got a top block. Okay, he was in this kind of a job. Now maybe your next OER, because you were doing a heck of a job, we moved you into something really, really challenging. You're a second year major. And you don't get a top block, but super strong writing in your, I'm going to look at that and go, yeah, he jumped up from AAA ball to the major leagues.
Yeah, it's like you're reading between the lines.
You absolutely have to. But again, it's not so much between the lines. I'm reading, I can read.
You're reading the whole book. You're reading the book.
So by the time I start, the difference between when I start and what I see, it's like any character in a book. You don't start off knowing everything about that character by reading chapter 1. You learn, there's flashbacks, there's, hey, this is what I want to be. There's a lot to it.
So there's, on the NCO side, a personal example. The 2 worst NCOERs in my whole career is when I was a recruiter for 2 years. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, I liked recruiting, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. I'm a trainer. I like training soldiers. I like doing that stuff. Every other NCOER, and my first NCOER was in 1992. So yeah, I've got a few of them, but that's the very 2 worst NCOERs were recruiting as an E7. And I'll never forget the very first bullet on my last NCOER as a recruiter. Very first bullet under competence to old NCOERs. Lacks the heartfelt drive to be an R&R NCO because I resigned Title 32 AGR to go Title 10 ADOS. because I was like, it's not for me. So, but I sprung back from that because that wasn't my cup of tea. I got it. I understood, I was trying the best that I could, wasn't me. So I was like, I need to tap out. I need to go somewhere where I know what I'm doing. I'm really good at it. And I went to train. So I trained 10,000 soldiers in the next 4 years after that last worst NCOER in my, so.
So the narrative, the overall narrative was, Sergeant Major in this case, it wasn't, he wasn't going to be a career 79 Tango, right? But that wasn't where his skill set was. And clearly, as evidenced, the G35 Sergeant Major, people took the whole of his story and not just that those one or two chapters.
Looked at those, you were like, I don't know. I mean, I was no lie. Last NCOER was all successes. They were trying to give me a needs improvement. I was like, no, not going to happen. I was like, all successes. And I was like, and then just write bullets that, are fair of what I did. I went out and became a substitute teacher for the state of Indiana. I repelled soldiers, RSP soldiers off the rappel tower because I was one of 2 rappel masters in the whole state. So I did things. None of that was on my NCOER. I didn't make mission, and I'm quitting. I'm like, okay, well, that's not what I want to do. So
yeah. So I guess
clearly this is not a recruiting video.
No, yeah, but no, honestly. So all I'm getting at is some people are really good at recruiting. They love it. They're great at it. And so be it. Those are the people that we need out there. And like, it's not that I didn't want to do well, but it's just like, I wasn't a numbers person. So it's like, I wanted to do what's right for Captain Carr, not just because I needed a number.
I think this is part of that advocacy that we talked about a little bit earlier. I think this is where good leaders, great leaders, recognize that, hey, that's not your skill set, right? I mean, I've used this before. I'm not going to be, chief of nuclear engineering anytime soon. That's not my skill set. Yeah. So I've got to have good leaders who are advocates for me that say, hey, here's your skill set. I'm going to put you in a position to be successful. I'm going to be honest with you. If you're not successful, or these are the things, right? And again, I go back to, then over time, my evaluations are really going to be about me and my career, and it's just going to be a better picture of who I am. But you got to have those leaders too. Yeah. This is a leader business.
Well, and that's what you talked a lot about, like the role of the Raider and senior Raider focusing in on their soldiers and knowing their piece of it as leaders from the soldier perspective, kind of what, piggybacking off of your personal example here with those interactions with your senior Raider, talking about potential, like you said. What is, I guess, what is your advice on shaping those comments, I guess, if it were, like, things when it comes to like successive assignments that personally you want to build into your career map. I know we've talked about that before on a podcast. I guess, what's your advice on managing that relationship?
You listen, as the rated soldier. So first of all, hey, leaders out there, take an interest in your soldiers' careers. If you don't, go do something else. All right, that's what you're here to do. And so I think if you approach it, so every day, I like to think, and I'm not always, as successful as I want to be, but I'm receptive to that conversation. And you've kind of referenced a couple of times we've had these discussions. Listen, that's what we're here to do as leaders. I want to make sure that you understand what my expectations are of you. I also want to understand that if I'm not clearly articulating those to you, when you come in and that feedback, that dialogue, that goes on throughout the year, so that when we talk, I know maybe why you're not accomplishing. Maybe I just, quite frankly, haven't been clear in my expectations. Right. That's a challenge sometimes, right? Yeah. But then through that dialogue again that we have, I know where you want to go because I've asked you, where do you want to go? What do you want to do, Josh? What is it you're expecting out of this career, right? And hey, you want to be Chief of Staff of the Army? Well, let me tell you. Okay, so here are the things. I've not been the Chief of Staff of the Army, but based on history, here are some things you probably need to do. You want to be an infantry battalion commander? You need to be a successful company commander, right? So, and I can be honest with you, but then from that, when we talk about those successive assignments, when we talk about what's going into your evaluation, I can also help shape that too. Like I'm gonna take that into consideration because we've had that discussion.
Well, and that's a good point, sir. 'Cause, and if you have some Sergeant Major to add on to it, but I did this with my battalion commander. This is a personal example, right? I got back one of my OERs, and I was just like, hey, I sent it back to him, sir, and I was like, hey, sir, like these are, like you mentioned, these successive assignments. This is actually something I would like to do as well. And he went back and actually rewrote the whole thing and made it what I felt was like a much stronger bullet just by taking a second look at it.
Expectation management, and then also, within Title 10 land at least, is and Title 32 is different in its own realm. If you're an AGR person, it's there's only certain jobs you can do. You're going to go from a readiness NCO or a supply guy to a readiness NCO, or at the company battalion level, all the different levels. But it's just expectation management and just talking with people, and like you're saying is let them know what you're interested in doing. Hey, I want that hard job. That I want to do that one hard job that's out there. And let them put that on you, and let it be something that's realistic that you can attain. Because so many times I've looked at successive assignments and we're like, well, that's not even really his expertise. Why would we send him over there? It's just because somebody knew that they've used that one before, so I'm going to put that down. Well, make sure it pertains to that soldier.
Yeah,
that's the storyline, basically.
Yeah,
it does. It's so listen, and I've used this for a few people. I recognize that some jobs are really not commonplace. All right, so one that I've used when I want to really say, hey, this soldier is absolutely one of our best, I might put things down there like, hey, potential job would be, XO or AXO to the director of the Army Guard, or maybe aide to the SecDef, or aide to the chairman of Joint Chiefs, right? I recognize that nobody's sitting there at the computer and going, okay, Captain Carr, now we're gonna nominate him. Yeah. However, to a board, when they see that and they go, wow. But it also, again, comes back to the dialogue that you and I are going to have when you see that and you go, hey, sir, just so you know, I have no desire to ever do that, which then hopefully leads to me saying, well, why would that be? And this is what I see in your future and what you're capable of, which then leads to you saying, well, if you think I can get there, how do I do that, right? What schools, to Sergeant Major's point, what schools do I need to go to? How do I develop, right? And that's that relationship. So I go back to, it's different when you're a brand new lieutenant, right? Because you don't know that. And the captain, he's got just a little bit more experience, but that's where those sergeant majors, and that's where those colonels and those lieutenant colonels, and even those majors and those first sergeants, where they come in and they can sit down and have those discussions with you and really help you understand. Because yeah, I get it. We're talking about evaluations. What we're really talking about is taking care of your soldiers. Your career is as important to you as mine is to me. And every day when I show up to work, and particularly when I'm doing awards, evaluations, when I'm making recommendations on where somebody should go for an assignment, I lose a lot of sleep over that stuff, because if it hadn't worked out for me and my family, that's money, not, that's opportunity. I'm sitting in a command now, a brigade command now. I mean, I wouldn't have had those opportunities if people along the way, from my first sergeants when I was Sergeant Blanchard, or my first sergeants when I was Captain Blanchard, all the way up. I mean, I think about the advice, the insight, the counsel, and that's really, the evaluation is the culmination of a lot of work over the course of time. If it's just another piece of paper that you're putting together, shame on you, leaders. That's what I would say. Shame on you. Take an interest, because somebody took an interest in your career, and that's how you got to be a sergeant major. Right. That's how I got to be.
I'd rather see less bullets and have them be quantitative and qualitative than just a fluff bullet. If I'm going to see, I call them fluff bullets. So if it's a generic statement that I could make about just about any soldier that did job A, then it's a fluff bullet. It's just something I'm trying to fill in there. So that's why I'm saying try to make it to where it relates to the individual soldier, because now you can tie it into how are they doing? How are they doing it compared to the last 3 people that have done it? Or just in general.
I tell you, so I had this. So I actually had this discussion with someone earlier today, coincidentally, right? And so the question kind of came up with was we were talking about those jobs and those evaluations. Once you get to a certain point in your career, you can't go back and do those. Like I, as much as I would like to go back to being a squad leader,
can't do it.
That's not going to happen, right? And so if I miss a job, if I miss an opportunity, if I miss an evaluation, or the quality, the depth of that evaluation is not there, I can't go back and undo that. I can't go back and get that job as an S3. That's an 04 position, right? So I'm not going to have that opportunity. And I think it's super important that, again, that dialogue that we have, that Raider, senior Raider, rated soldier discussion has to include those things, because again, the senior Raider is the one who's hopefully putting you on the track so that as a captain, when I talk about your future, your potential, your future jobs, I'm putting you on a track or not to get the job that you need as a major so that you can be competitive when you're a colonel or when you're a lieutenant colonel to become a colonel, because you can't go back in time and fix that. The evaluation, if the evaluation is milquetoast, if it's super, like anybody could get this evaluation, that's always in there, right? And so that's the discussion. If you see that, you got to say, hey, sir, is this now again?
Yeah, I had this exact discussion with my boss the other day about applying for some of these broadening assignments, and it's like, well, you only do company command once, so it's like if you miss something in your timeline, your rest of your career, you're gonna have your suffer because of it.
But we tend to look backwards, right? And we always look back and say what you should have done. And I'm telling you, that's a senior Raider's job to tell you today what you need to do in now and in the future
to be successful.
Because that captain can't really tell you how to become a battalion commander.
Yeah.
No offense.
Yeah, no.
But that battalion commander can help you, having seen what he or she did, as well as their peers, what successful people, what experiences. Hey, the person I really wish I was as a battalion commander, these are the experiences that he or she had. And I can relay that to you so you can understand. That doesn't mean you got to go down that same track, but at least you're informed ahead of time. That, again, is part of that evaluation counseling that has to occur. Where do I see you in the future? And it can't just be, hey, you're number one of 12. You're number one of 12. And oh, by the way, this is where I think you need to go. And these are the things that the evaluation is so much bigger, but it's only bigger if we take advantage of it, if we do the right things.
Well, and it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about here, Sergeant Major, both you and you, Colonel Blanchard, is the mentorship piece of this. How, like, really the evaluation should be reflective of senior leaders and your leaders mentoring you throughout your career and giving you honest
feedback. Yeah, definitely.
I could write an evaluation in 30 minutes because I've put in 12 months of work with somebody. In other words, it's, again, I'm a little bit more senior, so I've been doing this a while, but the evaluation is going to be a quality evaluation that I can do in a shorter period of time because, as the Sergeant Major has talked about, we put in the work ahead of time, and the mentoring. This is just the capstone event for that year. It's not the last event. Hopefully it's not the first time, and it shouldn't be the last time, but part of your evaluation is really that mentoring. But I will also go back and say, I'm going to say it again. Hey, as the rated soldier, you got to be honest with yourself too. And you got to be receptive to that feedback, because I might not say that you're number one. Right. And that is, I've had that discussion. Well, how can I be number 3? How can I be middle of the third? Okay. First of all, remember that conversation that we had, or, hey, let's talk about these things where I made you go back and redo them. Right. And so sometimes that's not a super comfortable conversation to have at the end, but those are also things that you should have, as the rated soldier, should have picked up on during the course of the year. The first time I kick something back and I say, Captain Carr, this is not, go back and bring it to me again. That's an opportunity now for you. The number one guy, you want to know what the number one guy does? Number one guy or girl doesn't come in and have every single time it gets through on the first go. That's not happening. But the number one person is going to say, hey, sir, let me ask you this. How can I do this better? Okay, I see this. And they're going to take that feedback honestly. And now they're going to go back to their table and they're going to work until, I'm not suggesting anyone has to work till 2, but they're not going to accept that. And the next time you come back in, it's going to again, that dialogue that continues throughout the year. And because you're looking at yourself honest and you're receptive to feedback, I only got to give you that feedback once. All of a sudden I see you giving it to somebody else and helping my peer. That's how you become number one, because the potential.
Not only are you fixing yourself, but you're fixing others.
So Sergeant Major, as we have a lot of turnover with personnel within the Army, and we've noticed a lot of turnover within our soldiers, to be honest, as a whole, I know it's something that the Guard struggles with. What's the thing that we can do to kind of combat that stacking the deck for certain individuals, or that good old boy system that I know sometimes it can be prevalent within the Guard? How do we ensure that the most qualified soldier is getting put in, or is getting promoted, is receiving the evaluation they deserve, and isn't being overshadowed by someone who's being protected, quote unquote, by their friends within the organization?
Right. I think the biggest thing is just looking at the processes and making sure, some states, if we're talking at state level, you don't want all the buddies sitting on the board, because they're going to promote, they want to broaden their perspective. Possibly, if I'm trying to do a readiness NCO, I want to get some G1 people involved, some just outsiders per se. So they're looking at the actual documentation in front of them and not having that personal bias when it comes to it.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is we got to make sure that we've got the right leaders in place long term, and it's an iterative process. If you've got those pockets of less than excellence out there, then again, leaders, you got to get involved, right? To suggest that we're going to get it right every single time, I really wish that were true. But again, that's engaged leadership. That's literally our job, to get out there and make sure that that's not happening. And where it is happening, at some point, somebody senior enough needs to stick their hand in there and make sure it stops. Right.
And I mean, if you keep doing the right thing, I was an E7 for almost 10 years. So 4 different promotion systems within the Guard. And, I had one sergeant major tell me, well, you keep doing this to yourself. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm doing like the best that I can, and he's like, well, you keep changing from Title 32 AGR to Title 32, Title 32 ADOS, Title 32 AGR, Title 10 ADOS, Title 10 AGR, all 4 of them different promotion systems. So like within my E7 realm, it's like, I'm out there, I'm doing things. So just make sure you just got to keep striving, and the hard chargers are going to prevail, and like Colonel was saying, it's hard to, if you're put in charge of that process. I've kind of seen some of the processes. It's a lot to take in and a lot to absorb, and it's you get board processes, and everybody kind of looks at records slightly different. To all 3 of us could look at the same person, and one of us could be way off in left field because I might know something personal about that person, whereas you 2 don't. So you're taking it literally for what it's worth, but I got my little bias in there, so it's either good or bad. So then that's why we always take an average of the board members of this is where it needs to be.
That's a really good point. Before we dive in, I guess, to talking about like some resources and best practices for young leaders out there, is there anything that you guys want to add in that we haven't talked about so far related to OERs and NCOERs?
I think from my perspective, again, good leaders advocate for their soldiers, bad leaders advocate for themselves. And when you look at that, I'm talking about diversity across the force. And when I say diversity, I mean it in a lot of different ways. I don't necessarily need everyone to look and have the same career path that I did. right? In fact, I don't want that. I don't want everyone who does that. And so inherent in that is understanding the board process. I strongly encourage every leader to take the opportunity, sit on a board, really understand what is out there, understand the pool. You're going to be able to really advocate, be an advocate for your soldiers much better when you start to see, so instead of just seeing your 25 or 30 OERs or NCOERs that you've written, now you can see 1,000 of them, and you can say, wow, this is a really well-written document. I want to, not that you're going to copy it and take it back, but you're going to say, okay, now I understand how a group of 5 or 6 or 14 people can look at this and come to draw a picture, a word picture of that soldier.
Right.
And yeah, I noticed that. So when we were doing one of our programs up here, we used to get all these applications in, and I learned a lot about OERs and NCOERs by reading tons and tons of packets as they came in, as we prepared them for the selection process that we had. So not at the same level, but same concept.
But I think that's just a great opportunity to see it as an opportunity to grow. It's just leader development. To me, there shouldn't be a command sergeant major and there shouldn't be an 06 commander out there that has not sat on a board, because you are really, we're a commander-centric organization, and we need those guys and girls sitting in those positions who have seen a wide variety of experiences, of words. It can really write something that is better to put the right people in place for the future.
Yeah. So one thing I worked with Sergeant Major Sampa. So the way the regulatory guidance is written right now, just like you were saying, is command. All of the Title 10 sergeant majors are staff sergeant majors. So I don't even get asked to sit on a board because of the way our documents are written. So I talked to Sergeant Major Sampa, CSM Sampa, and he's working with the boards to get the Title 10 staff sergeant majors eligible, as long as it's not a command position. I don't need to sit on the command board because I haven't been a command sergeant major personally. But so if somebody has, then you could. But if it's just a promotion board, let us sit on it so we can look at it and see.
Well, that goes in with some of the stuff the big Army is doing too, right? Yeah. With like we just had General Johnson taking over an active duty division command. Yeah.
Listen, if we're going to keep doing the things that we've always done, we're going to keep getting the same results.
Right.
We need fresh ideas. We need excited, motivated leaders at all levels. Right. If we need enthusiasm about what we do. What we do is amazing. To serve our nation, to serve our communities. How can you not be excited about doing this? And so we need those ideas. We need people coming up. And 2021 is going to be, hopefully it's definitely a lot different than 2020, right? But it's going to be different, certainly than when I came into the Army. It's you mentioned 4 different promotion systems as an E7, right? And so I love what the Army is doing. I love what we're trying to do in the Guard, and we're taking a look at these things. Like, let's get the right people in the right jobs. Let's promote the right people. And when I say the right people, I mean those who have great ideas, that are truly leading their formations, that are agents of change, and that are out there advocating for their soldiers. Because again, I'm only here. Anyone who's been around me is shocked. How did this happen? But it's because I've had great mentors who, in going back to the evaluations, every single evaluation was built over the course of the entire time of that rating period. I can't think of one time in my career, quite frankly, and I know I'm different. Yeah. I recognize this is different.
I'm gonna say he is.
But I will tell you, I've been blessed with great mentors, great leaders I've never shown up and been surprised by whatever evaluation. And then I've never left an evaluation, that final counseling, without having some really good feedback about what to do for the next 2 or 3 years. It's been amazing. And so let's get those guys and girls, those leaders that I've been fortunate to work for. We need more of those, and let's get after it.
Piggybacking off that, last 2 questions. what's your advice, I guess? And we talked a lot about mentorship and stuff, so it might be rehashing some of it, but like, what is your advice to those junior leaders, like you were saying, Sergeant Major, the leaders of tomorrow? Like, what's your advice to those, junior soldiers like myself, to set them up for success, both, as a leader and in their career?
So as a leader, I'm trying to get everyone in the G3 involved. And I have an open door. If you want to call me, you want to email me, I actually got to watch myself, because I'll catch myself wanting to respond directly, be like, that should really go through that person's senior, whatever. So I got to catch myself, but I want to be an open book. I want to be, if you got a question, ask it. So as a soldier, me personally, don't suffer in silence. If you have a question and you don't know how to do something, ask somebody, and just get some kind of guidance and be like, okay, I can work with this, just get a left and right limit and go with it.
Yeah, I think, so I would just tell everybody, so first of all, everyone can be a leader.
Yes.
You get to choose whether you are a good leader or a bad leader, and make a change for everybody that you can. So whether you are a team leader and you've only, maybe you've only got one person in your team right now, but you can make a difference in that soldier's life, in that family's life. If you are a company commander and you've got 131 soldiers in your company, lead and be the best leader. Make a difference for 131. I don't care how bad your boss may or may not be. I don't care about all the other stuff. It's your job, leader. That company commander, that first sergeant, to get in there and lead. And then again, let's make sure we're selecting the right people.
Right.
We see that, and we emphasize those leaders who are doing it right, so that then that company commander gets to be a battalion commander. It gets to impact 550, 600 lives, and then someday becomes a brigade commander, and then, someday is the director or the chief of staff of the Army, and can influence just thousands upon thousands.
Mm-hmm.
Choose to be that person every day when you wake up. And so here's the beauty of it, and this is what if you do that, they won't let you down.
Oh, yeah.
They will make sure you are successful. Again, I use myself as an example.
Yeah.
Many, many times in my career, I've had people save me from myself.
Oh, yeah.
Because while I might not have been the smartest, the fastest, the strongest, the most agile,
Right.
they knew I cared about them. And so they took care of me when I needed to be taken care
Pick
of.
up the slack where it needed to be picked up.
And
Definitely.
yeah, so just be a good leader. Yeah, be a good
person. Honestly, that's what it comes down to. It's just care about people, and care. If you want to be successful, care about, your career as trying to help you be successful.
So last question then.
Yeah.
So January 2021, allegedly, they're coming out with new grooming standards.
Oh gosh.
Okay.
What's the thoughts? Have you heard any grumblings?
I haven't.
No, I don't know. I don't know if you could give us any of the scoop on this or not.
No,
So,
I listen. As soon as they let me grow a goatee, I probably still won't, because it'll come in gray and patchy. But listen, so I don't want to become the guy who's the get off my lawn guy, right?
Yeah. That's my job. That's my job.
Things change. The world changes. The Army is going to change. Society changes. Get on board, or go home and remember the quote unquote good old days. Which, by the way, when we were 25, 26,
there were people leaving then.
Yeah,
they were like, man,
they were always that good. Whatever the chief of staff of the Army says, whatever Congress says, whatever the boss says, I'll be in compliance. If he says shave 3 times a week, 12 times a week, whatever. But yeah, I wouldn't mind, some lamb chops, they'd look good on me, right?
Yeah. I can see it right now, sir. So
I can't grow up here, much less.
So with that, another thing, I was reading a book from Colin Powell, and one of his philosophies is, it's don't tell me no, it's how do we get to yes. So the same thing. So it's very, very good thought process, in the sense of, it's not, should we change or something? It's not, don't automatically, no, we don't do that. We don't grow beards, or we don't do this. It's okay. Well, how do we get to yes? You know, doesn't make sense. You know, back in the day, we didn't do it because of the way our ProMass sealed. You couldn't seal ProMass with a beard, so we didn't shave. You know, that's not as high of a on the board anymore. So maybe they're like, all right, well, maybe we can push that off, and so maybe they do go
Civil War. There was some.
Yeah.
There should be a rule though. Don't if it looks terrible, you know.
Right.
Your fellow soldiers will let you know.
So just FYI, I was in the old guard on active duty, and it doesn't matter what the regulations say. You cannot grow facial hair in the old guard. Against the rules. Can't happen. Won't happen ever.
Interesting.
I'll shave most days.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for coming on. I know that we talked about a lot of stuff, a little bit long-winded, but definitely appreciated both of you taking the time and energy to come out here. So
Anytime.
All right, we appreciate it.
if you would like more information on any of the topics discussed today, please visit our social media pages in the links below. Tune in to Leaders Recon over the next few weeks as we bring in today's leaders and pioneers to discuss their experiences, share their wisdom, and help you grow as a leader. If you like this episode of Leaders Recon, please don't forget to subscribe below and leave us a 5-star review. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.